Okay, I'm turning my video off.
Right.
Nupur isn't here yet. Nupur and Sarita.
No, Nupur is here. Nupur is here. She joined first. She's just put it on mute and
Then if it is on
stopped her
time,
video.
can actually start right on time.
Let's just give it one more minute, perhaps.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think we can start at VMFT end. Hello?
Hello, ma'am.
Yeah, well, I think you can start.
Yeah. Very good afternoon to all of you. So today we are going to have the webinar on women in the media, a journey of passion. Next slide. So I'm just quickly going through the procedure. So please mute while the speakers are talking, and participants will also be directly muted by the organizations. So after that, we can unmute the participants for the question and answer session. Please switch off your videos when you are not speaking. And please also use the chat or raise your hand button if you wish to speak during the question and answer. And then the moderator will call on you. Please introduce yourself the first time you speak. And please use the chat function to let us know if you have any technical issues at any time. You may also call 833-08-41099 or on the email which is mentioned there if you experience any technical difficulties. So the protocol is already explained, then followed by welcome by Dr. Sajida Bashir, then the introduction, and then it will be followed by moderated panel discussion, then with closing remarks by Professor V.K. Damodaran and vote of thanks by Deepamol Thomas. Thank you all. So now I invite Dr. Sajida Bashir to deliver the welcome speech.
Yes, thank you. Perhaps we can take this off then, Sajida. Yeah.
Yes.
Thank you. So good evening, everyone. It is my great pleasure to welcome all of you to this event on International Women's Day, an occasion for both celebration for all the advances that women have made, and also for sober stock taking, because a lot remains to be done for women to become equitable beneficiaries of society's progress, as well as become responsible, empowered contributors to society. VMFT has been holding such events for several years, and this year we are focusing on women in the media. We are extremely happy to have the Department of Journalism and Mass Communication of Mar Ivanios College of Trivandrum to co-host this event. Our speakers and panelists are a distinguished group, as you see. Together, they have an incredible wealth of experience, and we will just savor a very little of that experience in the next hour and a half. They're known to most of you. I will just say a few words right now, and then I will speak a little bit more about them as I introduce them. Shajin Karun sir is a celebrated award-winning director, and currently he's the chairman of the Kerala State Film Development Corporation. Our three panelists bring different perspectives of women in the media. Nupur Basu is an independent journalist and award-winning documentary filmmaker and media educator. She was formerly managing trustee of the International Association of Women in Radio and Television, the India chapter. Beena Paul is an award-winning director and editor. She's the artistic director of the International Film Festival of Kerala and International Documentary and Short Film Festival of Kerala. Sarita Verma, the third panelist, is the assistant editor of the Financial Express, Trivandrum, who has written extensively about economic issues. I also welcome Professor V.K. Damodaran, president of VMFT, a leading member of the science and technology community in Kerala, having held many government and international positions, and also a deeply committed social activist. A warm welcome to Ms. Deepamol Thomas, associate professor at the Department of Journalism and Mass Communications of Mar Ivanios College of Trivandrum. We also have in our audience the chairperson of the VMFT, Shri A. Suhair, and Shri Kayangulam Yunus, secretary of the VMFT, as well as Dr. Sajida, who we just heard, the director of programs at the VMFT. A hearty welcome to our students, to our audience from Kerala and from outside, including many students of journalism and media studies. The participation of different sections of society in governing its principal social, economic, political, and cultural institutions is what determines whether that society is inclusive, egalitarian, and reflective of the aspirations and well-being of all sections. The media, in its many manifestations, including print, film, radio, internet, social media, is a critical social infrastructure of our time, which not only communicates news, but also listens to the citizenry and shapes its values, beliefs, and opinions. It can be a tool for emancipation or for shackling people's minds. And therefore, it has an enormous influence on social action and on public policy. Women comprise 50% of the society, and therefore their participation in media is an important aspect of democratic governance. And it was not so long ago that they were completely excluded from it. So it's a journey of passion, as the title of our event shows, and we will be listening to that aspects of the journey, and yet it is an unfinished journey in many respects. Our program will be held partly in English and mostly in English and partly in Malayalam to give room for people to participate. Let me therefore move immediately to our introductory speaker, Shajin Karun, who will be speaking for 10 minutes or so. He is renowned for his artistic work as director and cinematographer, for which he has won numerous state, national, and international awards. And he has had a profound mark. He has left a profound mark on Kerala cinema. One of his unique contributions is institution building. He established and presided over the first Film and TV Academy in India, the Kerala State Chalachitra Academy, and he also launched the International Film Festival of Kerala, among the most prestigious film festivals in India, which has been accredited internationally and which hosts a popular competition from films and documentaries produced in Asia, Africa, and Latin America. Over to you, Sir Shajin Karun, sir.
Thank you. It's lovely on this day that I could able to participate on the Women's Day, as you put the title in the front, Journey of Passion. It's lovely to look into it from a filmmaker's point of view. Rather, if you look at it, I always want the nature, even human beings, for that good reasons, and by good reasons. If you look at it, 50%, whether animal or human beings, it belongs to male or female. And the tilt is very, very, in one way, if you look at it, it's very subtle. And there's not much of tilt in both ways. In that cases, if you look at it, that is the kind of an equilibrium in living with lot of clarity, lot of understanding, lot of ways which we think that future has a lot of things we can really look forward in terms of the gender issues, or rather in other ways, how the concept of passion, or how the concept of love, or the love of anything, like looking at the nature, or anything that you feel that you are happy with what you think. It is more important that way of an understanding a passion from a filmmaker's point of view. All my feelings probably from the very beginning to the end. I just wanted to express it very, very subtly, rather than many of my areas were not loud, but most of them are in a way to say that silence has a lot of indications there, but still they are very loud and strong. Like a musician's most difficult position for him is to find where to stop and where to start, and in between there is a silence. And we know that in all of our compositions all over the world, that use of silence in terms of understanding each other between one to another is very, very important here. As we know that we we are born in this world. We don't know the gender. We don't know whether you are a boy or whether you are a girl. And still, but then when you start understanding through certain kind of visions, probably I will put it as the culture, which is being arrived later by the all of the world through culturally. As a filmmaker, you look at it that way. We make stories based on that thing, and your experience based on that thing. Or in one way, if you say that you look at the society for that thing, generally to say what you want to say to different people. Look, in Kerala, the society is different, matriarchal society was different, and all over the world, society also is different. But what is society in overall, if you look at it? It's basically a product of culture, if you look at it. Even the language arrived later, clothing arrived later, colors came in later, literary work, they are based on these cultural backgrounds. And then the food is also to an extent around you and what you have around you. And based on that thing, if you significantly, if you mark it male and female, it is a product that you arrived from the cultural thoughts, but it is changing. Gradually it is changing. It's the culture, if you look at it, it's an invention of human being itself, like currency. Man made currency, idea of the economy, and so is the culture is made by the human beings. And finally, in the end of the day, you realize that you become slave to your own inventions. Like, now the economy all over the world. It's the rule. It is a culture. Capitalism is a culture. In that way, if you look at it, and if you look at this natural world, the biological world is different, cultural world is different, and then the human interventions for that reason, especially the idea of the sexuality and biological connect with that thing is also different. And over a time, I think the insights based on the cultural insights which we arrived years ago need to be changed, because as the world goes on, and then your informations and knowledge also becomes more healthy, or rather stronger to interpret in a different ways, in a different way to study the natural ways of biological interpretations on that level. I think it has a different meaning now rather than early, and even the passions, even the colors, for example, if you look at it, you look pink as the women's color, or even the fabric for that reason. So silk has some kind of feminine interpretation on a fabric. These are all cultural derivations earlier. Probably it has a different meanings. In India, you have the trains which have, say, that women's compartments, and then taxis for the women, and then all those related certain areas on how the male looked at the cultural ways, and how you saw it, how you found out difficulties. I still remember when I went to Pune Film Institute in 1970s, and I see during the midnight when I walked through the small roads there in Pune Institute, I see small girls like 17, 18 years old riding on the bicycles there in the midnight, which was a different sight for me as a filmmaker. But here in Kerala, see 7 o'clock or 8 o'clock, most of the people wanted to get back, and it's a matriarchal society. For that reason, so we call it with a lot of pride and everything. But how you look at it, it is the idea of the language, the idea of the culture, and then the idea of practice. These both, many areas, we believe that lot of differences. There are a kind of what is called, you keep certain things outside and certain things inside, and then you practice it, what is inside at certain time. A time itself is a derivation of knowledge, for example. And the clock is also a derivation of knowledge. If you don't know the knowledge, then you don't know what is the time for that thing, why the clock is invented, why it is been designed, and what is the 12 hours. And it's also and some people slave to the time, some people are escaped away from the time. These are cultural insight. If you go to the Switzerland, I remember that the people functions on the dot on the second, but the people here sometimes ask you to know that the time is quite extensively stretchable for many reasons. So this is also another knowledge. And these are our tools for the cinema also, as to an identification of the two gender, how you look at it passionately, and all our emotionals. Fortunately, cinema is the one area where, extremely subtle to document it and archive it. In 1950s, women is totally different, but then that archive passions are being brought back to the time through the cinema now, even the love and and the beauty of the landscape which we lost. And it's all a passion of what you look. I think the cultural insights that we understood on time to time, which is to me as a filmmaker, it's completely a wrong idea to be described in a different perspective in later days, understanding the knowledge of now. How you look at it, see that the values for that reasons in cinema you see in the earlier films you see the male and female highly decorative with their costumes and so much of ornamentation probably, and you don't know how much difference both male, the king and the queen and all those things, the costume which you understood in that level have a quite way of decorations. Even in the sculptures in the many of the temples are been highly decorative rather than any part of the world that way. So the decoration is been also been understood or probably exposed and exhibited in a different sensibilities to the public, that what is decorations and what is male decorations and female decorations for that thing. So is the concept of love for that matter. The normal dream between both of them, what is the dream of a female, what is the dream of a male. And now we know that the IT divisions, I also understand quite a lot of women wanted to keep alone or not marry. They don't prefer the marriage, they wanted to be alone. They have the money to support themselves. And then marriage itself is not really, if you look at it, it's a cultural design. It's not very natural. It's very rare. The idea of the food is also associated with, related to this one. It all needs certain kind of debate and relevance at this point when we understand what is artificial intelligence. And many of the, I'm sure in the long run, many of the in longer time, we have to understand that artificial intelligence based on the culture that is to be spoken through your what is that, and you know that Alexa, they wanted to tell you, they give me a music, and then how do they recognize it for that reason? And it is all, and also it's a man-made vision to think in a different point. I always asked some of the hardware, my son himself got an hardware engineer in artificial intelligence part of it. I asked him, can you make a female computer or male computer for that reasons? And can they speak emotionally different? How can you get it, that intelligence out of it? These are the separate codes for to understand. When we speak about this is right, this is wrong, and when we speak about the equality, and then we speak about the culture, we speak about the new culture, and then you remember that in earlier days, the cigarettes were being advertised in America for the women, saying that you are way ahead of future. So they asked them to smoke the cigarettes, and then, you know, quite a lot of women, they sold the product, but quite a lot of women went into the, you know, the cancer, and then, so these are certain idea of self-definition of what you wanted to do it in the concept to understand this. But both are important equally in many platforms to say that there is an equilibrium. Say there is a cultural equilibrium, there is an emotional equilibrium, there is a family, there is a idea of not that possessions, but an idea of understanding what means what. So this is the day I believe I understand this is that we both of male and female both are important to idea of being become as a kind of equilibrium to understand the emotions and passions, and also to learn this is what an art demands. And art also is invariably one good reason to see that there's a bridge between, even a long bridge between one country to another one, to pass on with more emotional attachment on that area. I think as a journalist in this time, I am sure that many of the people are under fear. And where is the fear comes out, and for what the fear comes out. Many people don't want to say anything when the social medias are quite often, and social medias are also used for the purpose of art culture, what you call the society, what is it meant for, and then what is you, if you don't want to hear certain things, you can switch off, but then you listen a lot of things invariably now more than 20 years back, and there are audience for the cinema. Our cinema is been now completely engaged as the commercial, as you know that cinema is only art form that is born during the man has invented currency. Earlier, that was all refined into much more critically and basically understood on a different platform and different level. And I'm sure at this moment, we need to look at what is culture, whether the culture is natural or whether the culture has really shaped a humanity, or culture has wrong interpretations to say that this is nature. Thank you for that. Thank you for all.
Thank you so much, sir, for that very insightful introduction. And one of the things I took away is your statement about how the use of silence is very important to understand each other. And this, we are engaging in a conversation, but I hope also that people will be listening to each other and understanding each other. Thank you. I will now move to our panel discussion, and we will come back to you if there are questions from the audience, sir, but I will now move to our panel discussion. I'd like to ask Nupur Basu and Bina Paul and Sarita to perhaps turn on their videos. The structure of the panel discussion is that I will pose a question to each one of them. In turn, they will have about 3 minutes, 2-3 minutes to answer that question, and we'll have a second round of questions, and then we'll open it up for questions and answers. I request them to stick to the time. Let me start with the first question to Nupur, but let me introduce her a bit more. She was formerly a senior editor with India's leading channel, NDTV. She has made a number of documentaries, including Dry Days in Dobagunta about rural women's struggle to ban liquor in Andhra Pradesh, Lost Generations about the impact of globalization on the poor in India, No Country for Young Girls about India's sex ratio distortion, and Michael Jackson Comes to Manikganj about the impact of satellite television on South Asia. She's not a stranger to Kerala. I want to highlight her Mothers of Malappuram, part of a BBC series about the role of women in solving development issues. I will be asking her about one of her films later, but first, Nupur, the title of this event is Women in Media, A Journey of Passion, and in many ways, you embody that title. Tell us about the passion that inspired you when you started your career, when you must have been a rare woman in a male-dominated profession, and what inspires you today.
Thank you, and a very happy International Women's Day to all of you. It's great to be on this panel with audience from Kerala. I have covered Kerala, all of it, north to south, many times during my years in both in print and television. And I simply love that state. So I just wanted to say that at the beginning. And also, as a journalist, we don't like the focus on ourselves. So if you permit me for a minute to take it off my passion to something that inspired me today before I came to this. So I just happened to switch on the TV, and I saw these women have come in large numbers, farmers from Punjab to the borders in Delhi to observe International Women's Day. one of them was reading a poem, and I'll just say the last sentence, and she said, "Itihas badal ke rahenge," we will change history. The other thing that I've just come off another Zoom where I was just invited to listen in was on Chambal Media. So these fantastic women, you know, with working with Khabar Lahariya, Dalit women in the Chambal, in the dacoit-filled lands of the Chambal, the kind of reportage that they are bringing, you know, to the mainstream, unheard of before. And certainly Dalits are still quite invisible in mainstream media, but having created this space, what they have been doing. So these have been my two highlights for today. So I just wanted to say that, and it's about passion. Yes, passion is what brought many of us into this profession and didn't push, and you know, we didn't accept things like going into civil service because we felt that as journalists, old school, we felt we could change the world. I entered the newsroom in 1982, and it was a strange newsroom. I was not the only woman. We had a couple, but we were, I mean, you would say like we were 10% of the newsroom. It was a patriarchal newsroom, not misogynistic really, but patriarchal, and very, very patriarchal. And there were three types of men, and we have to discuss men when we talk about how we, you know, then flourished in that ecosystem. There were three types of men. One that was very paternalistic and sort of wanted to protect us, send us for the flower show rather than into the crime beat, while our contemporaries were being rushed off immediately into the crime beat. That is our male counterparts who had just joined with us. We were being sent to flower shows and dog shows. Yeah, this is how one's career began, if you would imagine. So these were they wanted to protect us. There was another lot whose actions are now coming to the fore, and they were the ones that wanted favors from you if you wanted a good assignment. And, you know, sexual harassment, the Me Too movement, and you know what has happened last week. We've had a major victory on that front with the Priya Ramani case against MJ Akbar. The third type were, I would say, is why, you know, you're talking to me today, is the men who enabled us. There were editors who, you know, who saw the passion that we had brought into this job, and therefore wanted to give us those paths, open up those doors, which were shut firmly in the early 80s. And then, of course, the rest is history. But we must also remember the ecosystem. There was a single channel, Doordarshan. Okay, there were only newspapers, and there were magazines, and there was no digital media, and there was a state-run one single channel that you had. Fast forward to today, you have hordes of women in the newsroom, television newsrooms, 100+ news channels, and over 400+ channels. So you see the whole, you know, the whole scenario has changed. What is important is, has that passion been kept up? And if it has, with the large number of women that have come into the profession, what is the price they are paying for the passion? I think I'll stop here, and maybe, you know, when we talk, we will talk about, you know, about what price they are paying for this.
Right. Very good introduction to our panel. And I think let's keep that question about what is the price we are paying for that passion. We'll come back to you in the second question. So our next panelist, Beena Paul, I think is really well known in Kerala. She's edited over 40 feature films, working with many directors, recipient of 2 national awards and numerous Kerala state awards for editing. And she has directed and produced documentary films. Her latest film, The Sound of Silence, has been screened at numerous international and national festivals. She is the vice chairperson of the Kerala State Chalachitra Academy and vice president of the Network for Promotion of Asian and Pacific Cinema and trustee of the India Foundation of the Arts in Bangalore. Beena, I want to ask you a question about the experience of how women are represented in film in particular. Research by the Global Media Monitoring Project indicates that just under a quarter of news sources, people seen, heard, or read about in the media were women as recently as 2018, despite this proliferation that Nupur mentioned. Additionally, the news topics where women are most visible get the least coverage. You have been very active in promoting women in film. And what has been your experience in how women are represented in film in particular?
Thank you, Sarita. Thanks, Nupur. Thanks, Shaji sir. It was quite interesting. Shaji sir spoke about silence, and really my film was called The Sound of Silence, which is, I think we interpret it a little differently, where silence can be also screaming something out. There is also the silence of oppression, the silence of not being able to find your voice. It's really interesting that Nupur talks about the 1980s, which is when I started my career as well. And I came into the studio in Kerala. And while I see in Nupur's field this enormous change in terms of the number of actual women participating, I must say in film this has not happened. And it's a very strange thing because as Nupur has just said, women sort of populate very, very heavily newsrooms, news channels. It's really looked upon as an honorable profession. Honorable, important. So, because this is part of the problem of what women have to face in terms of making career choices, in terms of, stepping out into the world, and what is considered the right thing for a woman to do is very much a part of what is happening in cinema. I just like to bring your attention to a research study that has just been done and released this morning. And it is really interesting. This was done by Film Companion, and they have studied using rigorous research. This report highlights the discrimination on screen and will hopefully start a dialogue towards change. That's what they call it. So they have looked at 5 language cinemas contributing to the world, to the Indian cinema economy, which is about nearly 1,100 crores. And they have looked at it in 3 with 3 lenses. One is talent, content, and marketing. They have found, looking at 129 films across these over the last year, that more than 90% of HOD positions in film projects are filled by men. More than 90%. And in the South Indian cinema, it is only 1%. So you have very, very few women on the top as cinematographers, as editors, as directors. It is 1%. The streaming category performs slightly better. I don't know if you all are aware of the Bechdel test, which is a test that is done on cinema where a film is judged on its content to see how the women are portrayed. 59% of these films failed the Bechdel test. That is, did not even have one scene where 2 women speak about a topic other than men. So that is 59%. So your women are always portrayed as kind of, or 60% of the time as kind of add-ons to men. In film marketing too, male characters outspeak female characters in trailers by more than 4 times. This is a very interesting thing because we, as part of the Women in Cinema Collective, we also did this, and we found that even if the main character is a woman, it is always marketed on the basis of who the male lead is. 92% of key departments in a movie held by women. At just 2%, representation of women in cinematography is the weakest. So I'm not going into details of this study, but for me, this morning when this arrived and I saw this in sort of stark numbers, it really hit me in the face, because this is something we've been saying all along. And why is it important? Why are we screaming for this representation? It is two things, I think. One is, of course, voice, diversity of voice. How do women tell stories? What are the stories women tell? What are the stories that women have to tell? Why are those stories not there? Secondly, I look at it also in terms of workplace. You know, when you are the only woman on a set of 60 or 70 males, your workplace is by nature insecure. You are not you are not taken care of. Your contract is not special. You know, there is whole lot of things that happen. So the passion for me is to say that, look, unless women are encouraged and thought or told that this is a profession like any other profession, it is as exciting, as challenging as any other profession. Till then, this is not going to change. I think the only way it is going to change is by greater participation. I must say the Kerala government has done a wonderful thing, and Shaji sir has been part of that project, where 2 women have been given a huge grant to make films. So every year a grant is given, and that is the only way, that you have to keep bending the stick backwards to straighten it. So that's what I will start with.
Thank you so much, Beena. And those statistics are truly startling, really very powerful statistics, which explain what remains to be done. Let me turn to Sarita Verma. She comes from a different field, a rare group of women journalists who focus on economics. And being an economist myself, this is an area of interest to me, of course. And globally, we know that women are very underrepresented in economics, especially in academics and at the professor level, and even in certain topics. Sarita is the assistant editor of the Financial Express in Trivandrum. And my question to her is that in the area of financial and economic journalism, there are actually still very few women. But women dominate the journalism courses in Kerala, in US and many countries. You can see that even from the audience. There's a lot of women here, and many of them are journalism students. When it comes to the newsrooms, the opposite is true, even though there's a lot of people there, but they're not at senior levels. The women are not at senior levels. Why does this happen? And are there some additional challenges and barriers to women journalists in finance and economics in particular? How did you overcome them? Over to you.
Thank you, Sajida. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Thank you, Sajida. Good morning, and also a very good International Women's Day to all of you. All of you, very good, happy International. Although I'm quite delighted to be to participate with many of the panelists. Most of them are known to me. Nupur, we have met, Beena Paul, and also Shaji sir. So it's good to have a very solid, a more passionate discussion, meaningful discussion on the stage. As regards to your question, of course, in journalism also, there is a glass ceiling, and it's quite a jammed ceiling at that. Not that any bomb can shatter, not just in financial journalism, all over journalism, like in other professions there is. But you see a lot of people in the journalism courses now, but you should remember that some 20, 30 years ago, when I was also an entrant to journalism in 1984. So there was not as much an outburst of women in journalism courses at that time. during my greenhorn days. First of all, even journalism courses were scarce, and journalism was not considered a respectable profession for women at that time. So we have come a long journey that there are at least journalism aspirants have increased about 200% or 300% in the last 3 decades. As for financial journalism, I feel that it's not, you are specifically mentioning financial journalism. There are not serious entry deterrents to anyone, any person, male or female, who has a strong sense of development priorities and understanding of very fundamental economic concept and a love of data crunching. In fact, sharp financial journalists have a great demand in newsrooms. At the same time, what the difference is in the gender difference is because, as you know, in most other professions, in executive positions also, men kind of tend to assert themselves and have more networking capabilities. Journalism being, it is not a position that, it is not a posting with reservation. It is supposedly merit based, but it's actually in effect, it's a question of being the right person at the right place. So that is one entry barrier. And as regards to gender, there is a recent McKinsey report which read that which made a survey of several, not just journalism, of middle-level executive positions in all companies, saying that whenever there is an opening in a journalism, in a mid-level in a mid-level executive position, about 70% of underqualified men tended to push themselves into that position, while the number, even when women are overqualified, they do not assert themselves. So the vital difference is in the confidence levels. So we need more of assertiveness training, more of confidence in them. As for me, I happen to meander into financial journalism from cultural journalism because I had an MPhil in applied economics, and for the lack of confidence, I had qualifications which outweighed that. It is not necessary to have an MPhil in applied economics or any other economic degree to enter financial journalism. All you need is common sense and passion. But then many of my colleagues do not have the kind of degrees I have. So at that period, that was a part that made a difference. I feel that in the current situation, where women could actually easily make an entry into financial journalism, provided they equip themselves with knowledge and more of data crunching capabilities, and primarily acquaint themselves with the priorities in development economics, the gender gaps, all those issues, and how assertive you can make a play. As Nopal said, in the earlier days, we had a feeling that
Go ahead.
We had a feeling that we could change the world, but all those things are myths. But there are points where we can make a difference.
Right. Thank you so much. And I think those points reinforce each other. There is a question of confidence amongst women, and there's also a question of, I think, Nupur's points about, different groups of men who actually also help to enable. And this is a very important part of the overall progress for women, that, you know, both men and women need to take up this challenge of equal participation. So Nupur, you are the executive producer and project director of Velvet Revolution, which was produced by the International Association for Women in Radio and Television, and which covers all media, in 2017. In this award-winning documentary, and I just want to ask our colleagues in VMFT to put up the slide showing the poster, you have explored the motivations and experiences of courageous women journalists working in difficult circumstances and conditions of conflict. What made the greatest impression on you? Over to you. Not sure if you're muted. We can take off the slide.
If I have to answer your question with just one word, it's what inspired me and my 5 other directors who made this film, and I sort of tied it all up together, is passion. Each one of those women who give their testimonies, and they're from Syria, Afghanistan, India, and some of them Dalit women from remote village in Andhra Pradesh, not just the grandstanding television anchors in studios in Delhi, but we went down to the grassroots, and Philippines, the women that speak truth to power, Afghanistan, UK, Bangladesh, all their testimonies showed that despite what they were going through, the challenges and the threats they were getting both from state and non-state actors in the last couple of years that they have been doing their job, one thing that they were not willing to give up on was their passion for their profession. In fact, at the end of the film, I had made one exercise with all the characters. I had said, let's ask each one of them, would they have chosen any other profession despite what they've been through? And each one of them, one of these journalists who were our protagonists in the film, said that never. I mean, they just would not. In fact, one of our colleagues, Bina's and mine from IWRT, who's the chapter head in Afghanistan, is in the film, Najiba Ayubi. And till today, she's there in Kabul, where every single day a journalist is being killed. And the latest being 2 women journalists who were killed, television reporters, just a week ago. And we are constantly telling Najiba, just get out of the country now. But she says she won't hear of it. She says, no, I mean, I can get out, but what about the rest of the people in Afghanistan? So, I just digress to show you through one story what people have been willing. The woman from Zainab, I'm sorry we were not able to show you even the clips of the film because of tech problems, but a woman who's had to live in exile from Syria, Dalit women who are saying that they want to bring out a paper, who bring out a paper, whose circulation is quite phenomenal in Chittor. And yet when they go to do a story in an upper caste home, they're made to stand outside and they cannot enter. So the whole issue of caste, where are these Dalit journalists in our mainstream media? All these questions. Velvet Revolution was one, and this question I'll take a little longer than I did in the earlier one, just to say that the reason I decided to sort of zone in on this ecosystem, look at it through a gendered lens at women journalists in Velvet Revolution, was because we'd begun to find that the red line, which was there earlier, where male journalists would be killed, had been breached. Suddenly, in the last about 5 or 10 years, this red line had begun to be breached, and women journalists were increasingly under attack, and they would just shoot them. In India, and I would like to also quote a study which my colleague and friend Geeta Seshu and a colleague of hers, Urvashi Sarkar, did, calling Getting Away with Murder. They're looking at just India and how about 19 attacks on women journalists in the last 5 years. Attacks, 1 death, thankfully, just one so far, but this one was a really, really painful one because she was a dear friend of mine, Gauri Lankesh, who, you know the case, what happened, just because she took on Hindutva politics. But the rest, some of the attacks on the women were actually near fatal. The first attack in 2012 on Tongam Rina, the editor of Arunachal Pradesh, was she was in AIMS for weeks on end with so much, so badly wounded and traumatized. So I mean, they came there meaning to kill. Petrol bombs thrown at the Shillong Times, Patricia Mukhim's office. So these kind of threats, and this is from Kashmir to Kanyakumari. So you have state and non-state players trying to intimidate women journalists. And then under the COVID times in the last 1 year, we've had several cases of FIRs being filed against women, attacks on women journalists. A woman journalist was badly beaten up in from Caravan for going to do research on the Delhi riots. And some of them, I mean, this is all on the media. You can see they've all given their accounts and said, but we will not stop doing the job that we do. So how did journalism, which was a profession which was meant to bridge policymakers with community, with civil society, and give people a voice, how did a profession like that, which is one of the pillars of our democracy, become such a dangerous job? And I'll just put one figure in front of you. This is a worldwide phenomena, 10 years, but that doesn't mean that, just because it's worldwide, corruption is universal, so let's be corrupt. That's not what I'm saying. I'm just saying that increasingly authoritarian governments think that journalists are enemy. And you've heard the biggest, the country where, the US, where Trump said they are the media, the enemy of the people. So when you have powerful men who rule the world, who put out this kind of messaging, then, attacks on journalists, men and women, is just minutes away. 937 journalists, according to Reporters Without Borders, killed in the last 10 years. And the number of women journalists in this is climbing. It was not like that before, but it has become that. So the journalism has become a very, very dangerous job. But the passion is those who have sold their souls and are, going with the system. History will tell their story, but there are many who are staying on and who are, trying to, show the real thing on the ground.
Yeah. Thank you, Nupur. Yeah, definitely. You speak with the passion that shows through in the film. I'm sorry we couldn't show it, but I do encourage our audience to take a look at Velvet Revolution. One statistic that struck me from it is that you highlight that of the journalists killed, actually the majority are not killed in conflict zones. About 3/4 were killed for just focusing on politics, corruption, and human rights abuses in their countries. And that's really quite telling about.
Absolutely. So women journalists who are gone after environment stories, sand mining, they are attacked from Kashmir to Kanyakumari, as I said. And also
in Philippines, and it's very similar across the world. So we are, running a little late. So I do want to encourage our panelists to respond briefly, as we want to open up to a few questions which we've already received. So Bina, young people are attracted to the glamour and glitter of the film media. And you have been vocal, as you said, also in response to the first question, in highlighting the issues of women in the film industry, especially in Kerala. What would be your message to young women who are considering a career in the sphere to build the skills that are required now, but more importantly, to enhance women's empowerment in the film media? A rather large question, but a brief answer.
Well, I think women have to stop looking at the gatekeepers and build confidence. I mean, gatekeepers, starting with parents, starting with production men, directors, producers, etc. These are all the gatekeepers that sort of prevent you from actually getting in. Like many artistic professions, in the early days, whether you were a dancer or a singer, you were always considered this kind of maverick so when you get into film, you're also considered this kind of strange person who doesn't belong to any mainstream kind of honorable profession. As I said earlier, this business of it being an honorable profession is very important. This notion of women being able to only go into certain professions and not into another professions is a huge handicap in cinema. But I think cinema has to change from within a lot before it can attract women. Which woman would feel safe to be in the company of 70 men, 75 men? Unless there are specific kind of designs and plans to say, look, on a set, you need to have at least 30 women or 25 women, and this is not something new. I have to tell you that I don't know if you've heard of Anna Serner from the Swedish Film Institute, and she did a wonderful thing. She became the CEO. This is the other thing, that unless you have women on the top, women who decide policy, who can make such decisions, it doesn't work really. So she decided that all funding to films in Sweden will be given 50% to women. And everybody was astonished. This was about 7 or 8 years ago, maybe 10 years ago. And I have spoken to her about this, and she said she was vilified for this. But she stuck to it. And today, the Swedish film industry is transformed because you have literally 50% of the films made are by women. So you have to have aggressive policy. You have to have aggressive change. I think there are film institutes. You have to make it more and more comfortable for women to go there. You have to perhaps give scholarships. You have to, there are a whole lot of things. There is an aggressive need to change sort of perceptions about what this industry is like. And we cannot remain in the kind of 50s and 40s where it was all, men sitting around in this club. It's no longer a club. It's a very, very professional space. It's very commercial. There's lots of money. There's lots of decision making involved. And I think starting from the top, which is governments, to individual producers, there has to be a concerted effort to change this skew. And of course, women are nervous. I think, especially in Kerala, there's a lot of, hesitancy. And I think Sarita spoke about that, lack of assertiveness. This seems to stem out of an education system, like we talked, that doesn't, which educates you in one way, but doesn't allow you to sort of be yourself in a sense, to speak out, to whether it is to want choose a profession or talk to power really. So I think but I would say that the aggressive need is for policy intervention to make sure that film becomes a more equitable space.
Thank you, Beena. And
can I just say something here?
Maybe
Beena, just one, responding to something that Beena has been saying, that journalism is a respectable profession compared to going into films for parents or whoever wants to encourage their wards to go. Do you know that we've been called prostitutes? That's what journalism and Indian journalists have been reduced to being called. So I just wanted to park it there.
Okay, that's pretty shocking. But now let's moving to from the film workplace to the broader workplace. I think it's a good segue. I want to ask Sarita this. Shocking statistic from India is that it's one of the that it's the country with one of the lowest percentage of women in the general labor force, not just film or wherever. That percentage is just 21%, which is lower than many sub-Saharan African countries, and compare it to 83% in Nepal. India also has one of the highest rates of gender-based violence in the world, and this is considered a major barrier to economic participation of women and girls in India and more broadly in South Asia. So, Sarita, what can the media do to expose and discuss the roots of these problems about women's participation in work in India in a more consistent fashion?
I feel that it's good that you pegged this question, but then the main issue is that media does not. Our biggest employer is the private sector, not only in India, most of the countries abroad also the biggest employer, and we can probably make some our voice heard in the policy circles, but we cannot get the private sector to hear our voices. That is one big handicap. For example, in the policy circles, sometimes only when the media, the government calls for the journalists for a talk on their manifestos or on the policy, gender policy, we specifically, this is a pet peeve, or especially the female employment in the work participation rate is a pet peeve, especially in Kerala, where it is Kerala, although it leads in several social indicators, not only in unemployment rate, about 50% of the unemployment rate is among the female, in the female sector. Currently there are 40 lakh female unemployment, female job aspirants in Kerala who are not getting a job. So this bias as to the media portrayal, that is secondary, because before that, when we address it on policy forums, right now an election is on the roll, and during manifesto discussions, we have several times, we have put forward several suggestions, like especially since private sector is the major player in employment, that the government should make paternity leave probably mandatory, probably as an incentive, or probably suggest in the policy, so that this bias against hiring women who probably who are fear to go off in the mid-management during their pregnancy and during their childbearing age. Because of this, we have suggested several mooted suggestions, like incentivizing subsidized employers who give subsidized childcare, and also remote working, or either mandating or incentivizing a particular percentage of women workforce in each firm. Many of these things we can suggest to the government, but one problem in airing it to a wider audience in the media is that there is no readership or viewership for it. Violence, whenever there is a gender issue, there is no, whenever there is talk of gender sensitivizing the news stories, the newsroom, in the daily agenda, there is immediate, the newsroom is receptive to immediately taking up any issue of gender violence, because there is a visual or sensationalism associated with it. When there is a rape or a murder or even both, media will rush in with sensation, as if it's a toast of the day. And after that immediate outcry is gone, it goes off. But at least it gets aired at least that way. But the saddest part is that one solution to violence against women is empowering women with economically, and for empowering women economically, they need to be provided jobs, and to provide them with jobs, we need policy interventions, and for policy interventions, we need to project them to the cultural, socio-cultural edifice, that there is such big gap between work participation rate of females and work participation of males. Right. Even in a relatively socially forward, socially advanced state like Kerala, the female work participation has been so low. I feel the only way for financial journalists to make it, to bring forth the issues, to make the numbers more entertaining. How it's a question of making the data more entertaining, making the data, giving visuals to the data, giving dramatizations to the data, because it's just because the public or the market, media is always portrays only what the readers or the viewers want. Only make it more entertaining, and that is the only good way forward.
Thank you very much. We will open up to the audience now, but just to wrap up on this, I mean, it is also shocking that about 85% of Indian women in the big cities say they have experienced some form of harassment in public spaces. It's not just the violence, but it's also the continuous harassment. And this is definitely one of the reasons why, you know, women find it hard to go out to work in different surroundings. But frankly speaking, in 2021, when that is happening in India, I think women in media need to bring out what the policy failures are, but also what are some of the cultural taboos that make this acceptable, that we think this is normal, that this is fine, when it is not, even when we compare India to other countries. So with that, I'd like to thank the panelists, but we move now to the audience. Unfortunately, in a Zoom setting, it's hard to see people, but I know that there are already a few questions. So whoever wants to go first, unless there's a big flurry, I would just ask whoever wants to speak, unmute, and maybe introduce your name, turn on your video if you can, and say who your question is for. I think we—
Good evening.
Yes, go ahead. Yes, go ahead, please, Vishwalakshmi.
Myself, Vishwalakshmi AS, second year journalism student. My question is to Nubur Basu ma'am. Ma'am, this year's International Women's Day theme is Choose to Challenge. Is it not something women in general and women journalists in a particular are doing every day? Is this Choose to Challenge slogan effective to eliminate gender inequality?
Nupur, you have to unmute. Nupur, you're muted.
Sorry.
Yeah.
So much for having worked in technology. Well, you know, I mean, I call it our day because, and really just marking one day as our day, well, it just brings into focus many things, much data, much research. It's one day where all of this gets tossed around. And then, of course, we are forgotten. And then rest of the 364 days, the same misogyny and patriarchy continues to rule our lives wherever we are, and particularly on this land. I mean, what can I say except Vishwalakshmi that, you know, it is just horrendous, the kind of harassment women journalists are facing and women filmmakers, women in the media in large, you know, what kind of harassment online. I mean, this doxing of women journalists with the photographs of pornography artists, you know, I mean, and then they're putting their numbers on online so that they can be hounded by those who don't like their politics, don't like their stories. I mean, we've been through really low moments in the last 5 years. And what can one say that, yes, one day we will celebrate, everybody will shut their lips and probably not say anything misogynistic. But the rest of the days, it's the same old, same old, same old.
Thank you. Next question.
Hello, ma'am. Good afternoon.
Yes. Go ahead.
Ma'am, I am Athena from Arvanis College, journalism second year student.
Yes, please ask your question.
Ma'am, my question is to Sarita Verma, ma'am. Many women, including the journalists, are coming forward to challenge their workplace issues. Is the responsible same for women at different positions? Are the women treated equally without considering their religion, caste, economic background, etc.? Ma'am, my question.
Yes, Sarita.
Can you see me? Okay.
Yes.
Yeah. Sadly, I had to. It's a same sad story as early. Women journalists are, first of all, in workplaces, women journalists are not treated equally with men, despite, unless they are in quite high positions, which is unlikely, high positions within the hierarchy, and irrespective of the state where you are. I have worked in different states in India, and irrespective of the states, there is cultural and economic and even caste-wise discrimination still in the media also. Although media is considered, although those who come to the profession of media are considered more progressive than the people in the rest of the society, this still remains. But one consolation is that among the very young people, especially the under 30s, the new crop of journalists, even male journalists, this awareness of this issue is very strong, and they are aggressively trying to be fair in their dealings with their female colleagues. I don't know if this was your question, but I hope this answers this question.
Right, thank you. I think there's another question also. Please go ahead.
Hello, ma'am.
Yeah.
Hello, ma'am.
Yeah. Yes, go ahead.
Am I audible?
Yes.
So my question is to Beenapur, ma'am. We all know that a challenged world is an alert world also. Even with high levels of education and awareness, the general society of Kerala didn't understand with the woman who challenged. What would be the reasons for it?
Beena, yeah, you have to unmute.
Yeah. Well, that's an interesting question. I think we should all look inside and see what it is that has created this patriarchy in this world, where any challenge is treated as a threat. There is no understanding from where the challenge comes, why the challenge has come. I think that's the problem. I think we're a deeply patriarchal, in spite of the notion of matrilineal society, etc. I think we are a very deeply patriarchal society, and it is a very slow process of re-educating, sort of rewiring this society to believe that women are as empowered to ask questions, or to empower women enough to ask the same questions. So therefore, if I say, Like I want maternity leave in the film industry, for example, that I can't work because or I need a creche. These are considered totally like outrageous things. Now, why would that be? All of us have children, all of us bring up children. A lot of people have challenges of not having childcare. Why would a film set think it an outrageous suggestion? So I think this notion is that any challenge is considered a threat, and therefore if you're asking for that, it's considered that you're either being over smart, you're not wanting to work in this system, etc. So I think this rewiring is necessary. It is important that right from a very young age, men and women are actually taught what it means to be equal. It's not about just going to school together or anything. There is a certain amount of respect and understanding, and respect of the difference also, that there is not that men are not wanting to be women and women are not wanting to be men. There are differences. And now I must say there is also the notion of the third gender, which we have to take, how the gender is actually a social construct, and how do we deal with this and not pretend it doesn't exist. So my answer is that this challenge is not accepted because of a very strong kind of powerful patriarchy that exists in society. And it happens to women also. So my mother will also be part of this, if you know what I mean. So patriarchy has not got to do with men only, it's got to do with also women and how women view their role and their position in society.
Thank you so much for the questions. Are there any other questions?
Hello.
Yeah, please go ahead.
Yeah, I'm Arokya. I am an assistant professor at Central University of Kashmir. It was very nice to hear all of you. And I'm quite passionate about gender and education per se. And it opened up for hearing people from journalism and media aspect. I would like to thank you all for this opportunity, especially Beena ma'am for bringing in the aspect of trans women as well in the answering to the questions per se. So I wanted to pose a aspect which I thought might be interesting to all the panelists. The aspect is of how do women experience censure within media and journalism?
Okay, really good question. And thank you also for joining from the University of Kashmir. I knew that there were
Central
people
University
joining.
of Kashmir, not University of Kashmir.
Sorry, Central University of Kashmir. Thank you. I know there are people from other parts of India also. We're very glad they could join. Before I ask the panelists to answer your important question, Arokya, may I ask if there are any other questions also, and we can then distribute it to the panelists, because we'll go to the closing very soon. Anybody else?
I think
wishes
Swati
to ask?
Kurup has a question.
Yeah, please go ahead. Swati?
Yes, ma'am. My question is to Pur Basu, ma'am.
Yeah.
The word of art, culture, writers, world, etc. are perceived as a place of peace, injustice, and equality. The people in such places are treated as fighters against injustice globally. How far it is have in the case of rights of women and fight to protest women's rights? Ma'am.
Thank you. Any other questions?
Hello.
Yes. Go ahead. Anfi? Is it Anfi who's speaking? Go ahead. Unmute yourself, please. Okay. Anyone else?
Hello.
Yes, please. Go ahead.
I am Deepa from Marivanius College. I am asking to Beena ma'am. Still, India is dominating males in the film field. Did you experience any discrimination during your career or during your profession? If so, how could you manage?
Okay, quite a good set of questions. Let's take Arokya's first, and I think Swati's question, I think perhaps Nupur could take both of them, and then we'll come to Bina. And I'll, Sarita wants to answer any of them, that's fine too. Nupur, over to you.
I'm not quite sure I understood what Swati was really asking. I'm really sorry about that, but was she saying that certain professions are God's professions and we are meant to be a certain way? Is that what, I didn't.
Oh, okay, let's perhaps take Arokya's question first, which is about censorship of women.
Yeah, and I also, I will take that question on censorship, and Swati, maybe, we can talk later about this. So don't think I'm ignoring your question, I just didn't understand it. About censorship, yes, we are being censored. We are self-censoring every single day in the kind of environment in which journalism is being practiced now. And now the other thing is, in fact, I saw a question coming up in the chat about why do many women journalists behave like a certain other anchor. I will not name anyone here. I don't want to get defamation suits against me and go to court. But the point is that, why do women behave in a certain way, in the same manner in which the men are behaving, obnoxious manner? I'd like to take both these questions, actually.
Sure.
You guys put in the chat. I think it's the same question that, about how, we keep saying mother-in-laws are the actual devils. They are the ones who go after the devil. Mother-in-laws are not devils. They've just imbibed patriarchy. And as women are so good at doing everything they do, they imbibe patriarchy beautifully. Veena talked about our moms also, how they sometimes tell us, be really good to your husband and, whatever they tell us, So patriarchy is something that is imbibed by these people. And therefore, women journalists think that by behaving like certain other people who are behaving in a rather obnoxious way on television, it's no longer journalism on those channels. It's not journalism, it's propaganda. And if they continue to do propaganda, they're just following in that route. I just want to say that we, and many of you are journalism students wanting to know whether you should get into journalism, you must be scared at what you see. Such a polarized scene, where journalists are either you're of this ideology or that ideology. It was never like that before. We always challenged those who were in power, whoever it may be. We were not supposed to be dining or supping with this one or that, nor openly advocating our ideology. We're in a highly polarized journalistic scenario now. And what you see about how certain other female journalists are behaving is exactly in line with that. And what has happened and what has suffered due to that is the solidarity among journalists. So when journalists are attacked and journalists are killed and journalists have defamation and criminal cases against them, the people from the other side of the ideology will not come forward to defend them. And because they, these are real problems that we are encountering now.
Thank you.
And if I can add to that question on censorship,
go ahead.
We should take it in the context that we should remember that last year, 2 channels in Kerala, Asianet and News 18, were muted for 48 hours for covering certain events in New Delhi. The problem with this censorship is that this makes proper journalists, including women journalists, go for self-censorship. And self-censorship is bigger than the actual censorship, because the fear factor works, and you either join being this a censored person or become more aggressive and join the rat race of hogging the media space. Both are dangerous propositions. So we have to go for a tight walk between these.
Well, before I pass to Bina to answer the that question. And there's one more question in the chat that I would like you to address before we wind up. But I just want to bring up the point that, you know, VMFT is a memorial also to Vakam Maulavi Abdul Qadir, who was a great journalist and fearless publisher. And one of the striking things about that period was the newspaper Swadesh Abhimani, which he started in 1905. Because of its fearless, you know, journalism, the editor was exiled and the press was suppressed. So it's not something we have not encountered in the past. And I think we have to just see what our response is in the present circumstances. Bina, the question about from Deepa, if you could answer that, and then there's one question in the chat that I want to pose.
Well, this is a question that's been asked often of me, and it's, you know, it's what you look at as being, you know, intimidated or harassed, or I worked with very good directors. I was very lucky. I've had a very sort of, so there wasn't any, let us say there wasn't any sexual harassment. There was a lot of judging of me as being, I was really young, and there was a lot of judging of me as being a person who may or may not be capable, etc., especially being a young woman. But I think what was really more concerning for me was what I said earlier, this atmosphere of always being the extraordinary, you know. You're the only woman in this whole studio. Are there toilets for you? Is there a toilet in the editing room? No. So, I mean, in that sense, of course, there was this whole sense of sort of being intimidated. And I came from the Film Institute, where we had just been told that, like, you know, go for it, and you've got to make your place in the world. I mean, we came from that very kind of almost rarefied space. So yeah, it wasn't an easy journey. And I have said often that perhaps in this journey, I had to often be not the woman, if you know what I mean. You know, men perhaps prefer to think of me as not a woman, to sort of deal with me at all. You know what I mean? So it's not been an easy journey, and I really wish that I don't wish it on anyone. I, in fact, am very keen, and I think, mentor a lot of girls and do try and make them feel comfortable. You know, discomfort is very, you know, when you're doing something creative, you're doing a film, just physical discomfort is very awful, you know. So, of course, there is mental discomfort also, but physical discomfort is very awful. And I do think that these were the challenges. And unfortunately, the problem is it hasn't changed so much. This is what is worrying. In the 30 years that I have seen or been here, I am not seeing, other than the fact that the WCC arrived and now there are a few, you know, but still attitude is much the same. You know, the moment you have a girl who's doing something, there is an attitudinal problem. And that is very, very alarming, I must say. I find that very alarming. Yeah.
Well, one last comment. I think it's a very good comment from Pradeep Moli, who says that he thinks that the discussion seems to be revolving around issues of the creamy layer, that's, I suppose, us women in the media, except for a passing mention about harassment of urban women, and no serious livelihood issues of women is taken up. Well, I have my own view on that, which is, I think, for instance, the film Velvet Revolution actually talks a lot about women, you know, speaking about the issues in their communities, which are really about livelihood and rights. And I think the questions about, you know, women in the workplace. But I think there's a valid point there, and I would like maybe one or two of you to respond, that, you know, how do we make the issue of the ordinary women much more prominent and much more like them, enabling them to speak for themselves, rather than somebody else speaking for them? I think there's a point in there about that.
I think
Nupur, go ahead.
Nupur can talk of.
Yeah, okay, I'll just go for, so just to be sort of a bit naughty, I mean, there is a man being judgmental about all the female panelists. Okay, so I mean, from the name, I guess Pradeep is a man, right? Pradeep, I just want to say to you that we've spent 40 years in this profession, Beena, me, and Sarita. Sarita less, she's younger than us. But we certainly from 82, and what all we have done is go to the field and talk to those people. And I hate this thing of giving voice to the voiceless and all that. How did they become voiceless? How did people become uneducated? I hate these phrases, The point is we did a lot of work on the field, and to have your entire career just demolished with one sentence from you is unacceptable to me. Please see the work that we have done. A panel is not enough time to just sort of address. And we have repeatedly talked about the need for having better newsroom structures where you have more Dalits and minorities. We've discussed it, and it's one Zoom session cannot say it all, but do give some credit to the work that we've done for the last 4 decades.
Beena.
Yeah, I'd like to also add that when I talk about the film world, I think you sort of get struck by the glamour, but it is very aspirational. A lot of young people from extraordinarily different backgrounds come looking, young women from all over the country come looking for employment and are disillusioned. So this is not about the so-called creamy layer. I'm looking at it as a labor issue, that you have here a profession where women are not welcome. So I disagree with this notion that it's only about urban women, or we have women from all over the country coming, wanting to join films and not finding those gates open. And this is true for men as well. The struggle is, of course, there for both men and women, but for women, it's an additional struggle, because you have to deal with attitude, you have to deal with labor issues, you have to deal with remuneration, different kind of pay structures. Your work is given different value. When we talk about the fact that you're not even given credit often, I mean, these are all not creamy layer issues. This is about what a profession, or how a profession works, basically.
Thank you, Beena. Anything from your side, Sarita?
Yeah, I think I can probably explain it in Malayalam.
Yeah, go ahead.
If it would help. Yeah, Dalit issue, rural area വരുന്ന ആളുകള് അവർക്കൊക്കെ മെയിൽ ആയാലും ഫീമെയിൽ ആയാലും ജേർണലിസം എൻട്രി ബാരിയേഴ്സ് ഉണ്ട്. ഒഫീഷ്യലി എൻട്രി ബാരിയേഴ്സ് ഇല്ല, പക്ഷെ വന്നു കഴിഞ്ഞാൽ they face the cultural, as Beena said, the attitudes have not changed. ഒരു എക്സാമ്പിൾ പറയുകയാണെങ്കിൽ കഴിഞ്ഞ കൊല്ലം 2 കൊല്ലമായി ഒരു ചാനലില്, ഒരു പ്രധാനപ്പെട്ട മലയാളം ചാനലില് ഒരു പെൺകുട്ടി, ദളിത് പെൺകുട്ടി, she made a suicide attempt, and she was complaining that one of the news editors asked her to not to come for the news present ചെയ്യാൻ വരുന്നതിന് പകരം പുറയില് അത് മാൻ ചെയ്യുന്ന ആളായിട്ട് ഇരുന്നാൽ മതി, because of her color. This is open discrimination. പക്ഷെ എന്നാൽ റിട്ടേൺ ആയിട്ടുള്ള ഒഫീഷ്യൽ ആയിട്ട് കേസ് കൊടുക്കാൻ പറ്റുന്ന വിധത്തിലുള്ള ഒന്നുമില്ല. So this means that the attitude people have, probably the laws have changed, but the attitudes have not changed, and there has to be more assertiveness and confidence from the people when they come from the grassroots. അത് മാത്രമേ അതിന് ഒരു മാർഗമുള്ളൂ. അപ്പൊ ഈ പ്രെജുഡിസസും ആറ്റിറ്റ്യൂഡും മാറിയിട്ടില്ല എന്ന് പറഞ്ഞിട്ട് നമുക്ക് ഇരിക്കാൻ പറ്റില്ല. എല്ലാ വശത്തു നിന്നുമുള്ള ആളുകൾ, സൊസൈറ്റിയുടെ ഏത് ബോർഡേഴ്സിൽ നിന്നുള്ള ആളുകൾ വരാനുള്ള ഒരു ഇൻവിറ്റേഷൻ ആയിട്ടാണ് നമ്മൾ ഈ മീറ്റിംഗ് ഇതിനകത്ത് എല്ലാവരും അതിനകത്തേക്ക് പുഷ് ചെയ്ത് പുറത്തേക്ക് വരിക. when the gates, as Veena said, the gates are locked. Gates ചവിട്ടി തുറക്കാനുള്ള ശക്തി ദളിത് വിമൻ ആയാലും ബോർഡേഴ്സിലുള്ള ഇവർക്ക് എല്ലാം ഉണ്ടാവണം. അത് മാത്രമേ അതിനകത്ത് പറയാൻ പറ്റുന്നുള്ളൂ.
Thank you so much, Sarita, for that, very capable kind of portrayal of the situation. Confidence building and really, having the skill to communicate, to reflect on your situation. This is something VMFT is trying also with the young journalists. But I am conscious of what Shajin Karun said, I think, about time being stretchable in our part of the world. And so we have come to the closing part of our meeting. And I want to now ask Professor V.K. Damodaran, who is the president of VMFT, to say a few words. As I said, he doesn't need a lot of introduction. He's a science writer, engineering teacher, environment and energy management practitioner. He is the founder of the Kerala Shastra Sahitya Parishad, and he has served in the government of Kerala as Director of Science and Technology and Environment, and as Founder Director of the Energy Management Center in Kerala. So over to you, Professor Damodaran, for a few words before we move to Deepa Mol.
Thank you, Dr. Sajida. And Nopur, Beena, Sarita, I don't know whether Shaji is still online. Shaji. I think towards the end, I opted to open my mouth only towards the end, because I really wanted to learn from these learned speakers on the various aspects of this particular issue of empowering women, which of course has a lot of dimensions and a lot of interpretations. That is something for people who have actually full career, they have actually gone through in a very, I should say, oppressive, aggressive, and passionate road. That was what they had in front of them. But this is not on or about journalism alone, and also people in this profession alone. I actually started engineering as a profession, as a teacher, and then as an R&D manager, and with so many capacities. For the past 60 years, I have been seeing not only this part of the world, that is Kerala or India, but several other countries developing as well as developed. And I have actually seen this issue, which I think it was ably explained by Shajin Karun. And I also like this use of the power of silence, about the language. There is a saying that language is actually meant for three things. One, to express what you know, or for you to express. The second purpose is to cover. That is, you want to cover something, don't express that. Language is there for that also. And the third purpose is actually to cover your ignorance. This is also part of language. So like this issue has actually a very, very precarious, this is a precarious problem with several edges. And I think it is not easy to comment or to come to a quick judgment. Why journalists are actually especially affected, according to me, is there is actually a little difference between a profession of journalism and other things. After all, who are journalists or the media person? Their job is to actually report events as it occurs in most cases. Of course, when you come to film media, of course you can actually cover a lot of time frame within it. But otherwise, print media or electronic media actually try to translate the event in an understandable manner to the public, and public is supposed to be a layman. So this is their task, and therefore anything which is not to my taste, whether it is male or an intolerant male or a very patient male, whatever it is, his response, or anybody for that matter, of this kind of reporting will be also spontaneous, instantaneous, and not with such wisdom. This is where again I go back to Shaji when he mentioned about this has something to do with the culture. It is actually the culture that has to actually change. I know people, when I studied engineering, this was actually the second batch of engineering in Kerala where at least we had 2 girl students with us. The previous batch had 1 girl. Later, of course, it gradually increased. So the kind of the difficulties they have actually encountered in completing a professional course of 4 years and then working in the field as well. So this is all. So in every field you will find, not only in journalism or in film media or anywhere, everywhere women had to actually make their own space, and for which somebody actually mentioned about the word confidence. Let me add to that, it is not enough if you have confidence. You need the courage. A young boy or a girl go to a stream of water, a river or a small nala, and you will find the boy will actually just jump into the water and try to swim, but the girl will actually, this is actually the culture has actually made her so. Otherwise there is no difference. Their worldly experience after being born is more or less same, but this is actually the immediate society. Somebody mentioned about mothers and grandmothers influencing in this. I know of one great lady who wanted to become an engineer, got selected those days, much earlier, even before in the late 50s, who wanted to become engineer, got selected, but her mother threatened. It's a very well-educated. Father allowed her to go and undergo engineering studies, and mother said, if you go and study engineering, that is not for girls. I will even commit suicide. This is what she herself told. Finally, she became an IAS officer, top person, and finally she had to find relief that she became the Postmaster General of Kerala. And she thought that at least she was actually controlling engineers, professionals in that position, even though she didn't study engineering. So this is actually where the society's grip on us. And sometimes even your courage will not help you to go out because there are many other things that is affected. Therefore, that is why I said this empowerment of women to have equal opportunity to express. And unless you express, you are not going to succeed. Unless you succeed, people are not going to notice you. In any career, whatever it is, whether you are a researcher, whether you are a teacher, whether you are a filmmaker, whether you are a journalist, anywhere. So this is what is required. And what our society currently is lacking is this equal opportunity to express each one. And this is where the problem is. How to actually unloosen this kind of strings that actually prevent women as well as oppressed people, that is those who are not empowered. You mentioned about Dalit situation. Dalits as well as women who are empowered, they are all belonging to the same class. men also who are unable to express themselves, unable to show that they are capable of doing, they are competent, they are courageous enough, and they are bold enough to move ahead, they will also come under this underprivileged, or what you call not very capable of doing, that category. So there is this division of the world now, not only in the educated field or what you call the creamy layer, or somebody mentioned in the, it is not a question of creamy layer or something. In every layer you have this kind of problem. And the intensity of discrimination and suppression is actually different in each one of these layers. So we have to actually, the kind of revolution that is required is, we should actually enhance the kind of cooperation between men and women in a family. I'm not saying that every family friendliness remains, but more than 90% of the families, men and women, adjust, understand each other, and also they try to bring up a new generation of people who are actually understanding by themselves, but open in the world. They actually are astray by various events, various views, and various situations that actually perpetuate the kind of situation that we had. And Sajida, Dr. Sajida mentioned about what Swadesh Abhimani had in the early 1900s. The whole press was actually locked up. And I think this was given back when it was actually rotten and it cannot be used after 1957, EMS Namboodiripad took over as chief minister. That was the time. Till then it was there. So there is to tell the truth and to kind of remove the obstacles in front of the society. If educated people actually give voice to that kind of opinion, there has always been in our society, not only in our society, this had been there in all those places. It was there in Russia, it was there in China. Which country had not this one? But unfortunate part is that having learned all this history, even now we see certain countries, I don't want to name, who are still in that back, what you call dark ages, maybe a century back. They are still behaving like that in this modern era where modern communication tools. So what I would say is the purpose of VMFT to organize a discussion of this kind and to obtain views and wisdom from such experienced women who had actually responded to these kind of situations out of their own confidence, their own courage, and their own wisdom. I am sure this will actually help us to kind of align the people whom we try to handhold in various activities to discard and dispel this kind of atrocities or the dividing forces in the society and take them together in a very cooperative world where men and women could actually work without this kind of a distinction. Because when I first went to China way back in 1992, I was actually very surprised to see how liberated women in China were. In fact, I was actually comparing with my experience in the early 80s in US. This was actually far, far better than that. When in the early 2000s, when I visited several countries in Africa, I found even there, they were economically backward, but some of the women, most of the women, I would say, they were actually much more forward and open than what I could see in Europe or in America. So it is actually a question of, as I have said, I go back to the same point of culture and our reinforcing the right kind of culture so that our next generation at least will grow where men and women are equal. And those who have the mental capacity, those who are actually empowered, those who have actually taken things passionately and seriously, they will have equal opportunity to express and grow. Thank you very much.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Professor Damodaran, for those powerful words and also for your leadership of the VMFT. We've worked together many times on this issue, and I very much appreciate your personal commitment to this. So I would like to now ask Deepamal Thomas to give the closing, the vote of thanks. She's the assistant professor in the Department of Journalism and Mass Communication, Mari Baños College, which has co-hosted this event. And she has had more than a decade of experience of teaching the next generation of journalists. Deepamal, over to you.
Thank you, Sajida ma'am. Happy Women's Day to one and all. Very good evening, respected speakers and dear participants. First of all, Mari Baños College Journalism Department is very grateful to Pakkam Maulavi Foundation Trust for collaborating us with this wonderful event. Here, the eminent ladies have discussed the topic Women in the Media, a Journey of Passion, and lot of insightful thoughts were shared during this session. I would like to express heartfelt gratitude to Shajin Karun sir, Nupur Basu, Bina Paul, Sarita Verma, and moderator Sajida Bashir. Indeed, the presence and valuable opinions of resource persons made this evening more elegant and rich. Definitely, journalism aspiring girls got more motivated and became more confident through this webinar. I may also thank V.K. Damodaran sir for your nice words. I thank all the participants for your kind participation. And once again, I thank VMFT for organizing such a fruitful session. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And so that's it from us. Once again, thank you. And we will touch base with all of you. It's very late. We're running late, but thank you again for staying back. Bye-bye.